Going into this season, I really expected more of the same. Over the past couple seasons, the show's settled into this rhythm that, while flawed, I can understand why people find comforting. This season specifically has a lot of ideas that are really well executed. My favorite example of this being episode 3 from this season, the Scavenger Vortex. Raj is holding a scavenger hunt and everyone has to pair off. Originally they were just going to have the teams be the couples, but Leonard says they should do it randomly. Everyone picks up on that he's only doing this so he doesn't have to work with Penny, since she's clearly the least valuable teammate in a knowledge-based competition. But this only motivates her to compete harder so she can prove her intelligence. Unfortunately, she gets teamed up with Sheldon, who is stuck up the whole time and slows him down at every step. Leonard ends up with Bernadette, who is naturally competitive, too much so to be polite. The entire scavenger hunt, Leonard has it in his head that he's putting his relationship in jeopardy by competing. He hurt Penny's feelings by not wanting to be on her team, and now he's letting it ruin the game. By this point in the series, we've seen the pair argue about so many things and walk away from it fine. There was no way Penny was going to break up with Leonard over this. So when Leonard is moping around instead of competing, Bernadette just rips the band-aid off. She tells him that Penny makes fun of him for being a coward behind his back, calling him, quote-unquote, another word for a cat. Leonard can't have that and immediately gets competitive as well. So Bernadette and Leonard are finally on the same page and they're flying through challenges, but not as fast as Penny. Even with Sheldon making most of the steps along the way take longer, the team covers enough ground intellectually between the two of them to make easy work of all the hints. So Leonard and Penny are competing to prove something to each other and themselves, and Bernadette's there just because she loves winning, and someone needed to whip Leonard into shape. When they finally get to the last clue, Raj reveals that the real treasure was the fun they had along the way. Everyone there is furious at him, but it really is so in character. That's like Raj's best feature. He's really sincere in a way that can sometimes come off as cheesy like this. Howard and Amy have been off this whole time doing exactly what Raj wanted. They had an awkward start, acknowledging they don't hang out alone or have anything in common until they bond over Neil Diamond. They end up not even finishing the scavenger hunt because they have so much fun together. It's a sweet moment for both characters and it's exactly what Raj intended. Nothing groundbreaking or anything, but a fundamentally solid episode and a pretty good subversion of the format that we're used to. Mixing up the teams was a good idea because they usually just pair off with their significant other, and it's nice to see some new dynamics. I enjoyed this episode, and there's a handful of others as well. They clearly know how to write these characters when they want to. I honestly feel like the show's pretty watchable at this point. I'm probably not going to rewatch it when I'm done with this, but unlike the first few seasons, there are very few duds. Every episode tries to accomplish something that matters, which makes it a lot easier to stay invested. My complaints about the first few seasons basically boiled down to nothing is happening, these people are terrible, and no one cares. While my criticisms from season 4 to here are all more typical for a show like this. Now I complain about characters developing in ways that don't make sense, which is way better than the complete lack of development in season 1 when half of the episodes meant nothing. I just wanted to make it clear just how much better the show has gotten before I move on to the things that bothered me. Last season we saw Amy and Sheldon's relationship ramp up a bit, but this time there's a huge jump that just felt so out of place for Sheldon. He initiates a long kiss out of nowhere. You could say he's grateful to her and that's why he did it, but thinking the kiss was entirely transactional doesn't give me very much hope for the couple having a healthy, intimate life. Other than that, I love them together this season. Even though I think Sheldon suddenly being okay with this is weird, it does make Amy a lot more sympathetic. Sheldon is clearly intending on living up to Amy's sexual expectations at some point, so her talking about it all the time makes me a lot less uncomfortable, which lets me focus on her positive traits more. She's had a big effect on Sheldon and understands him better than anybody, which allows the writers to use him way better. Her and Raj have struck up a friendship, being the sexually repressed loners of the group, and of course she has a key role with the girls. She's one of the most level-headed characters in the series, never one to initiate conflict unnecessarily. She picks her battles well and is very emotionally intelligent, so whenever a story centers around her, it will usually be worthwhile. Sheldon's kind of the opposite. Even though the writers have made a lot of big changes to other characters, they just can't seem to do the same to Sheldon. Honestly, the most disappointing thing about him suddenly being a lot more comfortable with intimacy is that they're doing this instead of having him develop out of his worst traits. So what we get in its place is all the other more dynamic characters developing around him. A lot of it is acceptable to some degree, since clearly not all of Sheldon's quirks are by choice, but some of the resolutions to these episodes ring hollow when we know he hasn't learned anything. There's still been progress made though, just a lot less than you'd expect. He's at least more aware of how much he cares about his friends, even though he's almost never willing to say it unless something else forces him to. The finale has him run off to think about things, so maybe after his training arc a lot of this development will come into play. Right now, he's the most in need of stories that allow him to grow. I would have said Raj last season, but I've kind of given up and so have they. He still spends all season going after women and failing in embarrassing ways, but they give him a little buddy which makes me a lot less sad whenever he's on screen. Stuart from the comic book store has started becoming a bigger part of the show, and he's even sadder than Raj. Ideally, both of these guys would get development, but right now their whole character is just how sad they are. Raj at least has other traits like being emotional and kind, but Stuart is just sad. He runs a failing business and has literally no friends. He used to host big events and be in Will Wheaton's friend group, but now he's nothing. He can't get anyone to want to be around him, his health is terrible, and he's broke. All he has is his comic book store, and by the end of the season, that's gone too. It's crazy to me that their solution to fixing Raj was to give him another sadder Raj to play with. And it kind of worked. All those feelings got passed on to Stuart now, who is honestly one of the worst examples of an offensive nerd stereotype in the show. But there's no time for me to focus on everything offensive in this. Someone could write a whole essay on the episode where Howard accidentally takes estrogen. That's not a representation of Season 7 Howard, by the way. That's just baseline offensive for this show. Howard is actually pretty good right now on average. His relationship with Bernadette being such a big part of how he's written makes him feel like a down-to-earth family man. He doesn't want trouble, he just wants to make his wife happy, but he's not a doormat. Bernadette is great too. She's a soft-spoken, thoughtful person who has a more aggressive side she can bring out if she wants. They're the married couple that help all their unmarried friends with their relationships. However, that'll change soon since Leonard and Penny are engaged now. It took a lot of back and forth to get to this point. They argue a lot, but as I mentioned before, they're clearly not going to break up anytime soon. They always come out of these disagreements better for it. Penny has also developed a lot alone. She's gone through a whole career arc, and seeing Leonard supported through it made them feel a lot closer. They have Stuart outright tell us why the couple works so well. Penny helps Leonard come out of his shell, and Leonard helps Penny think more deeply about the world. They're not a perfect couple, but they work well enough together for how opposite they are. Penny and Leonard's relationship was kind of the highlight of the season, so when we get to the proposal, it feels very earned. Unlike when Howard proposed to Bernadette in an earlier season. We'll see if we get the wedding in the next finale.